Welcome back to Everyday Eats with Michele. Today, I'll show you how to make this amazing, savory yet slightly spicy Sichuan Stir Fry. As you can see, we'll just be using a few simple fresh ingredients. Let's get started. We'll start by making our sauce. It's kind of important to make your sauce first simply because as we start cooking, things start to happen kind of quickly, so you'll want that sauce ready to go. I'm using a liquid measuring cup today simply because it helps me pour the sauce in later. Inside of there, I've got a half a cup of tamari sauce, which is really just a slightly thicker, less salty version of soy sauce. To that, I'm going to add a half a cup of water. We'll follow that up with 1.5 tablespoons of sugar. Then we'll add in 2 teaspoons of cornstarch. This is going to act as our thickener, so we end up with a nice, beautiful, thick sauce at the end. Then we'll add in 1 teaspoon of finely ground black pepper. You want it finely ground to help it incorporate into the sauce easier. 1 teaspoon of red pepper flakes for a little bit of heat, and 1 teaspoon of ground mustard. Once you've added all of your ingredients, you're going to want to whisk this until all of your sugars have dissolved and you've nicely incorporated all of your other ingredients. Once you've achieved that, go ahead and set it off to the side and we can move on to our vegetables. First up will be our asparagus. As you may remember from some of my previous videos, we need to remove those tough ends off the asparagus first. I've got about a pound of asparagus here. I like to use the bend and snap method. You can go ahead and cut it off with a knife, whatever works for you. Once you've removed all the tough ends, cut your asparagus into bite-sized pieces. About 1 inch should be good. We're going to be cutting all of our ingredients the same size, so the size that we cut our asparagus is the size we're going to be cutting our snap peas next, and then later our sirloin. If we cut our sirloin into too small pieces, it'll cook too quickly and we'll end up with tough beef, and we don't want that. Move your asparagus into a bowl, and then move on to our snap peas. Just like with our asparagus, we have 1 pound of sugar snap peas. First thing you'll need to do is trim off the ends. Now I know this is kind of a pain in the ass to do, but this vegetable adds a wonderful flavor and crunchiness to this dish, so it's kind of well worth your time. Once you've trimmed off all the ends, you can go ahead and cut your snap peas into bite-sized pieces, just like our asparagus. For most of them, that'll just mean simply cutting them in half. For some of the longer ones, you'll just cut them into thirds. Add them to the bowl with your asparagus, and then we can move on to our sirloin. I've got 2 pounds of sirloin here. You can ask your butcher to remove the excess fat and cut it into strips for stir fry. If you forget, or for whatever reason your butcher won't do that for you, don't worry, we'll show you how to take care of that now. You'll want to make sure that your knife is nice and sharp. Cutting raw meat with a dull knife is never a fun experience, and you do run the risk of injuring yourself. So what you're going to do is just work around the outside, cutting off all that white visible fat. We're not cooking this thing whole, so we're not going to have time to render that fat out. You may need to cut it into sections to get to that inner connective tissue. It's rubbery, it's tough, nobody wants to eat that, so make sure you remove it. And yes, I did go back and cut off the little bits of meat that I cut off too much of before when I was removing the fat. Can't always see it while you're doing it, not a big deal. Once you've removed all of the fat, next thing we're going to need to do is cut our sirloin into strips. You want to make sure that your strips are not too thick, not too thin. Too thick, it's going to take a little bit extra long to cook. Too thin, and it might cook too quickly, and you end up with tough, rubbery beef, and nobody wants that. Next, we'll need to cut the strips into bite-sized pieces. Again, we're going to want to make sure they're about the same size as our asparagus and our snap peas. This results in more even cooking, and it's just an easier eating experience for everyone if all of your components are roughly the same size. Once they're all cut up into pieces, move them to a plate, and then we can go ahead and start cooking. Next, we'll set a saute pan over medium-high heat. To that, we'll add 1 to 2 tablespoons of olive oil. Once your pan is nice and hot, you can go ahead and add your veggies. Give all of that a nice stir to make sure it gets coated in the olive oil. We'll add a few grinds of fresh sea salt and freshly ground black pepper, just a little bit. Remember, you can add more later, but you can't take it back out once it's in there. Give it a stir, and we'll let that saute for about 5 to 7 minutes. We're looking to add a little bit of color, a little bit of caramelization. Once you've achieved that, move your veggies off to a bowl, and we'll use the same pan to go ahead and start cooking our sirloin. To that same hot pan, you're going to add another tablespoon or 2 of olive oil. Your pan's hot, remember, but your oil's not, so we'll give it a minute or two to come up to temperature. Once everything's nice and hot, add in your sirloin in one nice even layer. Make sure everything has contact, and then don't touch it. If you try to move things around too soon, you're going to tear the meat, and that's not what you want to do. Let it sit for a minute. You'll notice the bottoms are starting to brown. Some of the juices are being released. That's your clue that it's time to start stirring things and getting everything else nicely browned. Now we can go ahead and add in a little bit of sea salt, a little bit of freshly cracked black pepper. We're seasoning each layer as we go, so don't add too much to any one layer. Now we'll add in our aromatics. 3 cloves of crushed garlic, 1 tablespoon of finely minced ginger, and the finely sliced whites of about 3 scallions. Give that a stir, and oh my gosh, if you could smell this right now, it is absolutely fantastic. As the garlic and the ginger start to heat up, it smells amazing. Once you've cooked out most of the pink, we can add in our veggies. Give everything a nice stir, get everything nicely combined, and then it will be time to introduce our sauce. You'll probably need to give it a whisk just to recombine everything because it's been sitting for a little bit, and that's totally okay. Then we'll pour it down directly over our beef and our veggies. Give that a good stir to make sure everything gets coated in that wonderful sauce. We'll want to bring our sauce to a boil. Once we've achieved that, turn our heat down to medium-low and let it go for about 7 to 10 minutes. We're looking to thicken our sauce up just a bit. Once your sauce is nice and thickened, time for the spice. A few squirts of sriracha. We'll add just a little bit of heat, but not too much. I don't add a ton to the whole batch. I let Chris add whatever he wants to his own serving because he likes it extra, extra spicy, and that's totally fine. And there you have it. Our savory yet slightly spicy Sichuan Stir Fry. I sometimes garnish mine with a little bit of the thinly sliced dark green scallions. You can do that, you can leave it off, whatever works for you. I also generally will serve it over a bed of basmati rice, but some days I just don't feel like going through the process of making rice, so I'll just heat up a little bit of garlic naan in the oven and use that as my starch instead. Do whatever works for you. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up, and please consider subscribing to the channel if you haven't already. We'd really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.